Hi, welcome to the OrgDev Podcast. So why does progress feel harder than it should in many organisations, even when everyone's working flat out? Why is it so difficult to get to the heart of the real issues in your team or across your organisation? In this episode of the OrgDev Podcast, we're talking about the invisible drag on performance, misalignment. When people act on different assumptions, even the most committed teams and organisations get stuck in confusion, slow decisions and fractured collaboration. And it's not about a lack of effort, it's often about a lack of shared understanding, and alignment is what cuts through the fog. However, alignment doesn't just happen, which is why we've invited a really leading expert on alignment, Lindsay Uittenbogaard. Lindsay is founder and innovation lead at Multiplier. Multiplier is a diagnostic that identifies and measures alignment gaps between people in teams. It does this to service the common ground and differences, providing insights that can be used in facilitated sessions to close the gaps. Before founding Multiplier, Lindsay built a rich and varied career in communications, innovation and change, which is a brilliant founding for this. And she started out launching the UK's first national car sharing agency for students, then went on to lead internal and strategic communications for major global organisations like Shell and T-Systems. And along the way, she's developed deep expertise in aligning people around purpose and strategy. Her work consistently centres on enabling clarity, connection and collaboration, foundations that would later shape the creation of Multiplier. And she lives in the Netherlands with her husband and two daughters. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on a sunny Friday afternoon, Lindsay.
Oh, we're really excited to have you with us, Lindsay. So just to kick us off, just tell us a bit about the work you're doing and we'll unpack that as we go.
So as you said, I'm working with a team in a company called Multiplier. And I suppose the summary is that we basically see alignment in and between teams as a process. And what we do is we give teams and leaders the capability to run alignment as a process, as an ongoing process. We've been doing this for about 9 years now. We're on our 8th evolution of the diagnostic. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've worked with teams around the world. And so I suppose that the work really involves feeling our way forward because it's a really exciting new field. And when we're delivering to clients and when we're seeing different situations, we're looking for patterns, we're looking for constant improvements, we're building community, building practitioner relationships, curating research, continuing to iterate what we do. So it's all about spinning multiple plates and then really pushing it out there.
Lovely. And alignment's a word that gets used a lot. It's all over the place. How do you describe team alignment? What's the definition from your perspective?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to start with, actually, because I think traditionally alignment is seen as connecting the parts of an organisation, connecting the strategy, the promise, the brand, the goals are through the organisation. And of course, that's really important. But when we talk about team alignment, and we're choosing our words very carefully here, we're talking about how teams of people relate the strategy and the brand and the parts to their work and how they relate to each other in that. And the reason why this is all of a sudden problematic, and it won't be news to a lot of people who are familiar, of course, with DEI and everything else, but if you've got everybody and their different perspectives and you've got the decisions they need to make and the actions they need to take and the behaviours that they're exhibiting, the challenge is actually how can a team and how can teams of teams think, act and work better together, given that mix. And so I just want to get on to a little bit more about defining the word, because I think sometimes people confuse alignment with agreement. And it's not necessarily that at all. There is an important nuance. And what we found in the research is that while teams do need to have an agreement per se on what the strategy means, so that's their context, where are we? And where they do need to have agreement on what are we going to do about that together out of the outside. So out of all of these signals and information and the context that they're in, they need to be, I suppose typically you would say on the same page, but they need to be working in a way that's unified. The bit in the middle, the perspectives and opinions, they don't have to agree with each other. And that's one of the things I really picked up about culture in the Netherlands from years ago when I first got here, is that it's okay to have a different point of view. You don't have to go into a meeting thinking, well, I need to persuade them, or, oh no, I'm going to be persuaded. It's all about, let's just share and learn from each other and see what sits, but we have to agree on what we're doing together. So we don't have to have the same point of view. So that's one thing about alignment and agreement and about the relationship between the two. But the second thing is that people tend to talk about alignment as, are we aligned? Well, nobody's It's a moving target, of course. One team member changes, a day passes, things change all the time. And it is about that processing the incoming information and getting to the outgoing as an ongoing thing. So it's about discovering, where are we misaligned? I mean, we just don't have time to sit around in meetings kind of saying, do we think the same thing on this? Do we think the same thing on that? Where is the misalignment? Some of them pop up to the surface. It's very clear, actually, we're talking about different things here. What do you mean by X? And some of that can be detailed, or it can be extremely crucial to the work of the team. But it's about really fast tracking the discovery process. Where are we misaligned? How do we deal with those? And what are we going to do about it day by day?
And where does misalignment come from? Because all teams want to be aligned. It's, the aspiration, we want to be aligned. What are the root causes of some of the misalignment from your research?
I mean, I've already talked about perceptions being unique, and so they should be. The last thing that we want is this complete agreement, which is not alignment, it's just groupthink, of course. But perceptions are unique. I mean, even from one day to the next, we talk to leaders who say, but I've told them what the strategy is. And why do they, and I've told them again, and I use the same words, and why I use different words. But from one day to the next, people's biases shape what they understand to be what they want it to be and what they're hoping it to be. So whereas some leader might be talking about customer responsiveness, and one person thinks, great, finally we're going to get into quality, we're going to make sure that it happens properly, and another person is saying, what they mean is about we need to get things through the door quickly, we need to get a reactive time, response time going here, and they'll interpret it to what they really want it to be, and that's totally human and it's totally natural, and we shouldn't try to fight that. But it's, well, how do we balance this? So that's the first bit. The perceptions are unique. The second thing is that it's obvious that, in today's world of complexity, there's just too much going on. Misunderstandings happen because we just cannot get onto the same page by simply having a briefing, going into a meeting. Remote working, as we all know, there's huge amounts of gaps there for misalignment in that. And then the third thing is, we align through language. We develop mental models and we develop our constructs of reality through language. Language is imperfect. So knowingly or unknowingly, misunderstandings happen as people are just hearing the same words to mean different things, interpreting things because different words are used differently in different situations. Jargon, ambiguity, digression, bad signals on WhatsApp. Anything can make a misalignment happen. I missed the word not is a classic one, of course, in we're not doing that. Right. Okay. But the fourth one, I think, is because of capabilities and conditions. It is actually a capability for people to share perspectives with each other in a clean way and manage their emotions in that process, or manage the way that their brain might be arguing with them about, rejecting what they're saying, coming up with questions to argue against them before they've even finished, to be able to ask questions that are clean, if you like, and free from bias of your own perspective, instead of, why don't you think it's like this? Instead of, what kind of X, Y, Z are you talking about? To understand somebody's perspective. But the conditions, when I talk about that, do we have an opportunity to stop and think? And people will together. And people will rebel against that, of course, with this huge pressure to move forward. But unless there are the safe conditions for people to share perspectives and learn from each other and just align in a rapid way, those conditions we just don't have the opportunity. So there's a lot of reasons why unprocessed differences, if you like, get carried into decisions and actions. And as soon as that happens, you've got conflicting directions going on, decisions and actions that conflict, things that are actually then manifesting into the organization as work in action that is causing problems as it happens, that people will then have to pick up on. Rework, undoing work, paying for something else, getting unexpected results. The manifestation of these misalignments between people is hugely costly, if that's the phrase. So that's how misalignment happens and how it kind of pervades an organization.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, do people understand that the need to talk more about alignment? Is there an appetite for this in organisations?
I've been waiting for the answer to that question for years, actually, because for me, it's like, oh my God, this is a communications opportunity, because communication people are trying to have shared meaning for effective organizations. And coming from an organizational communication sort of experience background there, I've been struggling to find out why isn't anybody jumping on this sort of years ago. And a lot of communicators, of course, it's about the scope for it in terms of, well, if it's about dialogue and it's about teams, it's not a communication piece. That's for OE. It's for, leaders. It's for, it's almost for everybody else, but it's really important. However, I'm delighted to say that in 2024, so last year, the highest trending search term above team effectiveness, team dynamics, and team performance was team alignment. And so that's really nice to hear, because then there's a language around what this is. People have been using coherence, because alignment sounds like agreement. What are we calling this? There was an alignment course at Said University, I think in 2019, that actually changed its name to organizational effectiveness because it wasn't resonating. But I think we found the language now, and there's appetite for the topic according to that language, according to those search term trends, which is fantastic. But there's always been appetite for alignment. I mean, even an employment contract is a way of trying to align people around what are we agreeing on here as a next step. Alignment is obviously connected to productivity and performance, engagement and staff, retention of staff as a result. How frustrating is it when it's misaligned? How frustrating is it when everybody sees things are disconnected? Fragmentation from the pandemic, I think, perpetuated an appetite for finding out about how can we connect better together. Connection doesn't seem to be a word that's still sort of associated with technology. But I think increasingly, because of the complexity in organizations and the unpredictability of the environments that we work in, alignment is now seen to be crucial for adaptivity and resilience. How can a team adapt? Well, it needs to know where are we at, and what are we going to do on an iterative basis. That's the basis of adaptivity. So when we talk about, or adaptability, when we talk about appetite for alignment, it's almost like there's this sort of like, what's this people problem? We wouldn't use those words. What's this people problem that we're perceiving? It's so difficult. We're pushing stuff uphill. It's also difficult. People are leaving. Everybody wants to be a freelancer. Who's going to stay in the game? How are they really working at home? This kind of coasting, kind of presenteeism issue. People are struggling with that. How do we get on top of that? And I think it's not like there's a silver bullet, but alignment is a big contributor to that. Who's going to be engaged if they're not first aligned, etc. So the gains are significant, but it's difficult to describe again. It's like a sliding doors moment. What would have happened if we had continued on our trajectory and not had that meeting where we confirmed that actually that connection meant this, not that? What would have happened if we had not had the opportunity to understand more clearly what the strategy was before we went down a particular track for 6 entire months? So the gains are significant in terms of, as I said, productivity and engagement and profitability, performance, sustainability. And I think the appetite has always been there for that. It's about how are we seeing that? What's our mental model on that? And I think it's really coming through now.
I think it's really important because there are so many terms in organizational life that we throw around, but we don't define clearly enough. It's almost like with Eskimos having different definitions of snow. There's different types of alignment, aren't there? I think I've heard you talk about sort of strategic alignment and cognitive behavioral alignment. So it is quite important, isn't it, for us to define even them that we're still aligned in what our definition of alignment is, and to give it a little bit more colour in our palette, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, we define it in 4 key domains. So there's the strategic alignment piece that's very prevalent today. There's stakeholder alignment, which is also very commonly used and commonly understood. But there's cultural alignment, which is about what are the capabilities. It is about capabilities, about the extent to which people have dialogic capability to relate to each other, the extent to which they have psychological safety to be able to express what they say, in the right conditions? Do they have the emotional development to be able to participate in a mature way in a conversation that has dissonance present? So there's the cultural alignment piece, but I think what brings it all together for us is this fourth piece, which is about alignment in action. So supposing you've got the culture, you've got the stakeholders, and you've got the strategy, then you've got to implement it. And ultimately, alignment is about effective implementation. So the alignment in action would be cross-team collaboration. It would be about being able to implement, to plan as a team and make decisions in order to utilize those discussions about what are we going to do. Okay, let's make decisions so that we then commit to it. So there's the four parts of alignment as we see it, but lots of people are tackling this in different ways, as you can imagine. So I could go through some of those.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the things is that you've taken on quite a fiendish foe in terms of like what you're trying to battle against, because there's all sorts of things that come into play, like group dynamics. We've all seen the meeting where like the manager says, "Is everyone in agreement?" Everyone says, "Yes, we are." And they walk away, and then they have the conversation afterwards again. I'm not in that at all. And so I think I've heard you talk about false consensus bias, where we kind of like we kind of almost agree our way into believing that we've agreed something, but we haven't really. So what are your methods for actually understanding where we are? Because often we don't know how aligned we are until after the fact, when we all produce something that's actually quite different or nothing at all.
So this is where, and that's a really good point, because a lot of times people get a bit frustrated about alignment because it seems like a sort of like side issue in the middle of a business conversation. And in a business conversation, there's always not enough time, let's face it, to properly sort of round things out. So there's this sort of pressure to move on, and it's like, oh, by the way, what do you mean by that? It's like, oh God, or does everybody agree? Right, we've really got to go now. Yeah. I don't. It's like that Monty Python.
It's a brave person that does that, isn't it? No, and I don't quite understand what we're talking about here.
Or it's an annoying person, because that's not the time. We like to see that alignment is a topic in its own right and should have a session in its own right, because that's the focus of the discussion, rather than it being like, oh, the focus of the discussion is to move on out of here with some actions. And by the way, we have to be aligned on that as well. What's alignment, by the way? Who knows how to do that? Should we try and sort it out in the conversation? That's a complete non-starter. So the alignment process that we're talking about goes into the meeting to say, all right, we've analysed the differences between us according to this tool that we're using, and we can see that there are 5 key gaps that make a huge difference to the way that we're going to work. What we're going to do is we're going to go around the table and not interrupt each other. It's a bit of Nancy Klein's Time to Think. You've heard of Nancy Klein?
Absolutely.
Going to just spend a couple of minutes each, and this is a skill, sharing our perception, not on who's to blame about the problems or what happened in the past and why, but about where we are now and how this affects us going forward. So let's say the topic is we're clear on our roles and responsibilities. And let's say the results of that poll around how we perceive that as to be an effective part of the team are very low. So everybody's either thinking it's very ineffective, or they just all have different opinions. They're all misaligned. So somebody will have an opportunity finally to say, okay, I feel that we're missing X, Y, and Z in the team. And, we all know about that, but the impact it's having is this. So I'd say it was quite urgent. Somebody might say, I'm new here, so I'm going to pass on this, so I'll pass to the next person. Fine, no problem. But there's a perspective sharing and a perspective seeking round where people literally get that piece. Remember, you don't have to agree with everybody, and everybody can have their own opinions, and that doesn't mean anything. Alignment means actually understanding collectively where are we now and what are we going to do next. So supposing you go around the room, you might have heard it all before, but it's pretty likely that there'll be some shifts in thinking, because the brain is looking to piece together fragments of information that are milling around into a mental model to help things make sense to me. And when they hear something useful, then it'll be like, oh, and there's that shift. Now, the shift could either be massive, like, but I thought you said that team were doing this project. Oh, no, they stopped last year. Oh, that could make a huge difference to your work. Or I thought you meant urgent was next week. No, urgent is the summer. Oh, right. So it's not all about misunderstandings of words. It's actually about information and knowledge and strategic context and behaviours. that all come into this mix of signals and inputs into the brain. But anyway, you've been around this sort of perception loop, sharing loop. And then a facilitator, anybody could be trained to do this, ideally as a trained facilitator or coach, but can say, okay, having heard what you've heard, is there anything that's shifted for you that either you want to share or just think about? Because people don't want to say, oh, I didn't know that, or I thought that was wrong. You don't want to put people on the spot. That's not the point. But you can then say, well, given all of that, what are the logical next steps that we as a single unit of a team need to take next? And there aren't that many. There's only about 9 of them in categories of find more information, involve more people and move it forward another way, or start, stop, continue, do something different, make a decision within the team. And it depends what's in the team's sphere of influence and what's out of it. But it's not, you can get then deeply into discussion where you can identify, actually, there are subtopics that we need to go around the room on, or maybe we do need to actually just discuss this. Sometimes it's about people just articulating something and getting it off their chest. Maybe they actually want to come to a session like this to say, actually, there's a point in the meeting I wasn't able to raise. I'll bring that into the next sort of alignment session or whatever they want to call it. But if you then are, it's obvious then, well, we need to get more information. Or it's obvious, well, actually only 2 of us need to take this forward with so-and-so from that team. We'll take that action. Or actually, this isn't as important as we thought it was. Let's just park. So it's being really clear about what do we need to talk about and what do we think on that, rather than just not doing it at all, which is basically what's going on. So that's what I call, so that's our take on it. And as I said, other people are doing it differently, but.
Yeah. Well, I think what's really refreshing about it as well is that it's not an indulgent, lengthy exercise. It's something that can happen in the flow of work, can't it? And that's important. I think even as we're having this conversation, there are thousands of meetings happening across Europe right now where misunderstandings are being built, leading to duplication of effort and missed deadlines. So there's quite a hard edge to this, isn't there? There is going to be a fundamental impact on the organisation's bottom line, and particularly when organisations are striving to be lean and to be efficient as well. This can actually put more resource back into the organisation, can't it?
I think, the first time a team would do this, they would probably have some resistance, and they'd probably be thinking, I can't say that, or they might be thinking, I've heard that all before. And as they're even listening to somebody, they might be thinking, oh, here they go on their soapbox. They keep talking about this. But at least you get the opportunity to have it said and hear someone and maybe empathize with a reason behind their thinking that you didn't really understand before. That simple act of going around the room to share and seek perspectives, and then they call it coordinating perspectives, which is how do we then, what do we make of that in terms of our next steps? It is quite streamlined. You could probably do 1 or 2 key misalignment, key gaps or insights, whatever you want to call them. You could go around one of those in half an hour. Maybe one of them goes on for 2 hours, but at least it's done if it's really important. But the impacts are colossal, because if you start thinking about, well, tell you what, let's just not do that. And I'm going to have my view on what you think, or I'm not going to know what you think. And we're going to go forward as a team on shared objectives. I mean, in a way, it's, I think this is why when we picked up this chalice, which is a difficult one, it's a slippery, what's alignment and how do we sense our way forward in this field, which has, by the way, got a ton of connected interdisciplinary research behind it. This is why I can't put it down, or why none of our team can, because it's just like, oh my God, this is so powerful and so needed. When we talk about the capability, it's the capability for somebody to be trained to facilitate that session, which isn't huge. There are high-level advanced facilitators that would need to be present in like executive team level. There's different levels of that. But then we talk about the learning and the knowledge. So there's probably about 5 key documents around what's alignment, how does it work, how does the brain work, what's the process, etc. That is a learning program that we're working on being a sort of on-demand, piece-by-piece tutorial thing that some people can pick up online. But then there's the tooling. So there's the tooling on how do you actually identify the alignment gaps, which is a diagnostic. But then there's the what do you do between teams when different functions and silos do need to have their boundaries, and silos is a very negative word, but they do need to be channeled. Otherwise, everything's everywhere, and what the hell's going on, but they do have the connections between them. And it's those missed connections between teams that adds a lot of value. At the moment, it's like, well, I think the problem is this, and we should have them do that properly. And well, I'll ask so-and-so if they can get on top of that. Oh, well, they were away. And oh, well, I did send them an email, but you know what it's like. It's just slippery as hell. I mean, trying to get, okay, the problem is that this information is not going to that team quick enough. The teams know that. Leaders can't see it. So let's get that specifically organized and specifically dealt with so that you can measure. Well, there were 10 things that came up between 5 teams who ran the alignment process last month, and 5 of them have been resolved. What's the impact of this on business performance? What's the impact on this on how people feel at work in terms of how they are bringing themselves to own their work? And what's the impact on how many possibilities arise, so you can call it innovation, but how many possibilities would arise from, well, if you think that and they're doing this, and actually I heard about this recently. What about, and it's all of those, let's do this next, that's better. Yeah. And we all know about surfacing options, but I mean, how can you surface options if people are seeing things from different perspectives and are not coming together on that? So, like I said, there's work around this has been done all the time. And I think what we're doing is just making it really streamlined, really simple, and really clear. This is what alignment is, this is what it's not, and this is where it helps a lot. And that's a capability that can be passed over to teams who I think can save a lot of time, money, and aggravation.
And you get right into the heart of the culture as well, because there's some organisational cultures that are deliberately set up to be ambiguous, because then we can't be blamed for something. It's part of the human condition, isn't it? Which is, well, if them over there, they're always working again. And I guess you're kind of surfacing it in a way, which is like trying to get people to, like I said, take ownership. And therefore there will be some form of potential, not necessarily resistance, but just like self-protection almost, isn't there? So this is a culture shift in many respects, isn't it?
We do call a kind of purposeful misalignment the dark side of alignment, if you like, because there is a fine line between what is actually things that people should not know, like they shouldn't know that we're looking at merging because there's legislation around, or they shouldn't, maybe certain people in teams shouldn't know that somebody knows they're about to move on because it's a bit destabilizing without something in its place. So there are kind of innocent and, if you like, legitimate, to use for want of a better word, reasons why things can be ambiguous. But there's a lot of really other selfish people going around in organizations. Remember in the couple of decades ago, it used to be information hoarders. Before technology, it was like people would hoard information. They'd be valuable because of it. That's just ridiculous now, isn't it? It's just like you can get anything online. And no, we don't do that anymore. I think the same would be for purposeful misalignment. I don't want to tell them that I'm working on this because I want to get the credit for something. I mean, it's just like, really, I mean, I suppose it is a bit of a culture shift, but I think everybody's ready for it. We got shared goals or not? Are we doing this or not? Are you in or not? This and the permission for people to be using misalignment for their own political gain, if you like, is something that organizations don't have to tolerate. So yeah, I keep talking about permission, about how things can be rather than how things are. You're probably right. It's a culture shift.
So you said up front that Mirror has been around 9 years and you're kind of on the 8th iteration of the diagnostic. What does that look like now? What would people see if they were using it?
Oh yeah. So essentially we're asking people questions about their own team effectiveness, not the effectiveness of themselves, but their team. And instead of reporting on everybody's individual results, it was always anonymous. But now what we do is we just show 2 scores. So one score is what's the average score for that effectiveness rating. So, it's 64%. Fantastic. Don't have to look at it. But then we show the alignment score, which is a formula based on entropy around the extent to which there's variations in the responses. And they could say, and that could be 19%. So we have that lot of people saying, well, some things everyone's completely misaligned, that something is either good or bad or in between. So that gives us a very easy priority rating, or a team, what we call it, team perception indicator, which is it's red, amber, or green. So if it's green, then they're both above 60%. It's effective and people are aligned. Fantastic. Let's not spend any time talking about it. If there's one score below 40%, then what's going on there? But then again, is it a priority for them to be discussing that? We can't discuss everything. Let's pick the top ones. Everything in between is an amber. But we also take a lot of verbatim comments on when we ask people to say whether the team understands something, like what is their top priority. We ask them to name what is their top priority. And because the team reports are only relevant between 5 and 20 people, because fewer than 5 and you can't really compare the responses, and more than 20 is just beyond usefulness, you can actually read down the verbatim comments that are jumbled up, by the way, so you can't spot who said what in the order that they come in. You can easily see, well, they think they're aligned, or they think that they know the priority, so they could rate that as effective and aligned. Then you've got to check that. Is the priority according to the team leader or whoever else is working with the team, or on values as well? What are their values? So it covers a whole load of components in around strategic alignment, stakeholder alignment, cultural alignment, alignment in action. And the cultural alignment piece is effectively a readout, as I've said before, of the maturity of the team to process alignment. So the coach will not go to a team and go right into conflict and say, okay, you guys say that you're not psychologically safe. Is that because of the leader? There's not going to be any of that, because we want to work with what is the team ready to deal with, that can make a difference to them at that time. Let's accept what their current reality is and move it forward. And like I said, the way that they'll take that report, it's not a results. We're not telling them that it's not a report that gives them anything other than a reflection of where they are, which is why it's called Mirror Mirror, of course. But they can take that reflection, which is a very specific results, to say, okay, how are we going to prioritize that? How are we going to then compare perspectives on that? How are we going to let everyone have their points of view and let everyone adjust their points of view or not? And then what are we going to do about it? And that report comes in a summary form. We've got rankings so that you can see very quickly, well, the top 5 low 5s. And we have 2 versions, one for teams with a high sphere of influence, like executive teams, and one for regular teams who have some of mostly inside their teams, a sphere of influence, and some external influence too. So I'm really proud of it, actually. And in the future, I can imagine people having an app where they can select which indicators, which insights do they want to talk about, and then they can be thinking about, how would I summarize my take on that? How would I, what do I think of that? And then they can bring themselves to work.
Yeah. And I think that meeting teams where they are is really important, and not kind of running before they can walk, because there are some foundational practices a team, I guess, needs to be comfortable working through. Do you find the leaders is it leader driven, kind of the people who come to do this? Is there kind of an enlightened leader who's like, okay, I'm willing to open up this sort of discussion with my team?
So it is either leaders who are just, I guess you would find, I don't know if you've heard of Leader X and Leader Y, but, Leader Y is the more curious, up to date. They don't take it as a personal offence if the team is misaligned. They take it as a responsibility to create the conditions for the team to align, so that it's more likely. And if they're backed up by their organisation, who see that giving team leaders the means to align is something positive, as opposed to something that they will be judged by, which is, I'd say, Leader X, then we're looking at leaders who don't feel they're being judged. They're curious. They've got a reason to do this, and they've spotted fragmentation, and they've been wanting to find something that deals with it. They haven't found it yet, because simply being aware of diversity doesn't tackle business problems that are subject to diverse difficulties through diversity. And simply knowing what your personality is helpful, but it doesn't tackle the issues caused by problems with differences in personality, etc., etc. So they've been wanting to find out, why is my organisation, how can I connect this team properly, and how can I empower them without kind of everybody losing track of things, So they're curious and they are open to new ideas.
Hi, we're just pausing this interview for a moment. Have you ever finished an episode of the OrgDev podcast and wish you had a cheat sheet that summarises all of the key points? Us too, so we made one. It's called From Pod to Practice, and each week in our newsletter we'll share a 2-page summary of the latest OrgDev episode, and it includes key takeaways, a reflection prompt, and one small action you can try.
And it's all in a digital format with space at the end to add your own notes and reflections, and it's designed to help you take the learning from the podcast into your day-to-day work. So to get your copy, just sign up to our Next Step to Better newsletter. The link's in the show notes, or you can visit our website at www.distinction.live to get the latest From Pod to Practice in your inbox. And let us know what you think. We'd love to get your feedback.
You've had a fascinating career today, and what's been brilliant is you've kind of iterated your idea and developed over time. What was your journey into the field? How did you sort of discover that alignment was a lifetime of learning and application for you?
So it was really, I think that I'm the kind of person that if I like to develop new ideas, and if I think of something, I won't let it go. So I'm there in this multinational organization looking at the whole, and I'm a bit of a conceptual thinker. So I'm looking at the whole organization just thinking, well, of course you'd have your achievement goal of 1.25% EBITDA achieved for the year through all of these employees if they were better connected and were actually sharing meaning properly together, because everyone's everywhere and yet everybody's walking around confidently with pieces of paper. Just, if they're in the know as far as they're concerned, they're fine with it, and everyone else can go and pick it up as they get along. It just felt like the organizations that I started working for didn't make sense, and that it was me and I was the problem. And why didn't I understand how to feel comfortable in these organizations? And then the more I talked to people and the more I got into it, the more I realized that actually they feel that too. It's really chaotic and they're struggling to understand why decisions are made, but yet they have to buy into them. And it's a communication challenge, but communications is really at the bottom of the pile, isn't it? Because it's just about PR basically and writing word copy text. And, thanks very much sort of for being there so I can delegate my responsibility to communicate, and then going into another organization and finding exactly the same thing, and then getting into a leadership team position in an organization responsible for communications and finding that they're not really interested, and just this journey started years ago. I've been consistently thinking, but it does make sense, doesn't it? And unraveling it, and then continuing to, and then I guess if you believe something, and there's actually some research that says if you're going against your values at work, it's bad for your health. And so, okay, it's bad for my health because I feel like I'm being challenged, but I kind of like the challenge too, and I like the discovery. And there's no way I can just go and be that rather than this. So that's how I got into it. And I started, I quit at one point actually, and took a big leap when my friend said, "Quit that." And I was like, "Yeah, but I have to earn money, and yeah, you'll be all right, and I had invested some money in a house, so I was like, yeah, okay, I've got that." And I started working with the University of the Technical University here in Delft, and had an intern looking at all of the existing research around alignment, and working with the Rotterdam School of Management on teams there who were being piloted around this, and set up the business. And I thought, yeah, I just need to get it going within 6 months, we'll be fine. And of course, it has turned into a longer journey, but it is going and it is moving. And the more it moves, the more energy you get from it, and the more you talk to people. So that's how I basically got into it, and still am into it.
And as you've gone further and further into it, and you've read so much extensive research, and I can sense things like social constructionism in there, and all sorts of different sort of disciplines being melded in. What's some of the research that's really made you go, "Oh my God, that is really surprising," or that's like, "Oh my God"? So that's how alignment doesn't work or does work.
Well, we've developed what we call a map. I'm happy to send it out to anybody, but a map of the theory of alignment that goes through various points and through how do people become misaligned, and then how do they become aligned again, and all of the research behind that. And it really started years ago when somebody who's now a professor of communication, Johan Siebers, who I used to work with in the energy industry, pointed out that dialogue is about shared meaning. It's between people. And I know that sounds really simple, but that was just like, of course it is. It's not about them or, or me. It's about what are we understanding together. And then based on that, the whole mental models research about how we create mental models, but how that's built up. So, for example, in 88, there was research about the fact that mental models exist to reduce cognitive load. And then they're actually essential, says Weik in 1995, for interpreting complex and ambiguous situations, because otherwise the human brain cannot move, because it has to make a judgment about what to do next. It can't just go blindly. Otherwise, it's the equivalent of walking off a cliff without knowing if there's a step ladder there. And so the way that the brain works in having to make assumptions, and the idea that assumptions are bad is incorrect to start with. Assumptions serve a purpose. They're just risky. And how much time have you got to take to check them out? I personally cannot stand going back to say, I've seen something in the news. I think I'll check out whether that's right. I'd rather just not watch the news these days. But, actually making an assumption and taking a risk on that assumption based on what you know and your existing mental model about the way that the world is really fascinating. And then all of these confirmation biases about wanting to shape your mental model in a way that suits you because it's more comfortable, and how the human brain is completely not suited to the way that we're in the working world today, but how we need to work with that in order to be able to manage the challenges of today and manage artificial intelligence, because ultimately we're running the show at this moment on that. So, things like fundamental attribution error, the fact that people are interpreting behaviors of people. Oh, well, they'd say that because that's what they're like. There's so many ways to become misaligned in today's world, and how hopelessly inequipped we are as individuals to do that, but as how clever and how amazing we are collectively to make sense of things and take action. Look at how quickly it took us to respond to the pandemic. Oh my God, there's a virus out there. It could kill us all, and we haven't got anything to solve it. Just within a few months, 24 months, yeah, there's a vaccine out there. Let's all get vaccinated, and back we go. Even though it's a new normal, we can do amazing things. So there's this vulnerability of humans, and then there's this power of the future and how we want to shape that for ourselves. That absolutely depends on alignment. Otherwise, we're stuck in the drudge of, oh, did you get that email? And all those ridiculously, hopelessly boring things that get in our way, that can undermine all of our good work and possibilities. So, I mean, that entire thing is just fascinating, all of the research.
You're putting lots of new colours in there, because it's very easy to go through your life thinking assumptions bad, bias bad, Slack fix everything.
No.
It doesn't work that way, does it?
Well, the very idea that I'll tell you what, let's put in a collaboration tool into our organisation and it'll sort everything out, which it does help people exchange information, but it doesn't help people align, because you can't put context to it, ask questions on it. Dialogue is the only way. There is no other way than dialogue. So the challenge is, how can we make it streamlined? How can we make it effective? How can we get good at that? And it's not difficult.
Make it sexy?
It's all there.
How can we how do you make it sexy to a manager? Going, look, this is really good. This is really useful. This isn't, this isn't navel gazing at all, is it?
I know. So I won't push the point, but imagine if you're on Zoom call, because you can do this on Zoom as well, and you've got 12 people there. They've been through the alignment process. They know how it works, and they've read the 5 documents or watched the 5 videos or whatever. It took them half a day. So they're in a session and somebody's saying, okay, but this is an alignment session, and we've got this new challenge at work. Do we all understand the same thing by that challenge that was emailed to us on Friday? Well, let's go around the room and share our perspectives. So we as a team do this. And so you think that, no, we're not going to argue with each other. We're going to ask questions. We're going to let it sit. We're going to trust the process. Our brains are processing this overnight, all the time, constantly. Just put the information in there, wait for a day and come back to it. Not that that's the solution to everything, but it's like, well, we now know about this question. We need that clarification. Oh, well, we immediately need to connect with X, with so-and-so. So that, that Zoom session people can probably come out of that if they know how to participate in it, feeling really a bit better about it. So that's I think it's quite sexy.
And it's that key, isn't it? People knowing how to participate in that sort of thing and giving people a new way of dialogue, of talking to each other, a new way of dialogue. So if you could give every team just one habit to improve alignment, would that be it, or would there be?
No, I think that would just drown again. That would be another one of those things that sort of, it doesn't cut it through. I think they just have to spend half a day, going through to understand, how does alignment work? How would I participate in it? How can I observe my emotions as I feel frustrated or challenged or energized as other people are talking? And how can I be okay with not being agreed with or not agreeing with other people? And that sort of skill, you can't just take a piece of it, I don't think. I think you just have to say it's a thing, and you do it or you don't.
What do you enjoy most about the work that you do?
I just think it's the discovery. I mean, it can be really uncomfortable when you suddenly realise after 6 years of work, your idea of who your market was is completely different. They still don't know what you're talking about. But I think seeing the progress and seeing that this really could be something that helps organisations and their impact, and coordinating that sort of plays to my strengths, and I really enjoy that bit of the job.
And what's on the flip side? What do you find most challenging?
I find fractional remote teaming very challenging. So, and we are having to, drink our own medicine all the time. And even only last week, I was asking Sam, but what do you mean by campaigns? And we had this totally different idea that had been tripping us up for weeks on that. It's like, I've got to keep asking questions. And the more remote and the more you are, the more questions that you have to ask. And sometimes that's really difficult because it's like, gosh, resources are precious in a business where you're pioneering something. So it's frustrating to think that you might have been tripping yourself up with your own stuff.
And if you look back over your career so far, what would you say one of the biggest lessons you've learned that you take forward in the work you do now?
When you've climbed the mountain, there's another one. And you always want to think, oh, it's just this mountain, but it's not. I think there's a really interesting series on YouTube called The Big Think. And there's a guy called, I think it's Brian Klaas, who talks about complexity and chaos, but he frames it up in that we have control over nothing and influence over everything. And so the fact that we're all interwoven in this fairly chaotic scheme of events with sliding doors all over the place, it's just so much it's about luck. So you just got to go for it in the end. I think that's what I've learned personally. And then professionally, what I've learned is that engagement and ownership and commitment aren't requests that can be made of people. They're consequences of meaning that is shared between people that has traction in their real world. It's about the connection between their personal and professional purpose with this organisation. It's about what they're prepared to give based on what they'll get in return. And it's about the balance between being led and being enabled. So it's not as if you can say, you need to go and engage your staff, or you need to go and, we need your commitment. Well, it's a dance between everybody. So it's that thing again about this betweenness that I think is really interesting.
Brilliant. And you're always focusing on new research and that as well. How do you invest in your own learning and development?
I think it's all sort of informal on the job stuff, if you like, because then when I'm speaking to people and I'm bringing speakers into our practitioner community, somebody coming in called Jackie Lefebvre on values pretty soon. I'm talking to her about what she's going to talk about. So, that's really fascinating. So there's on the job learning, and then there's purposeful, okay, I need to go and ask about that because I need to know more about that. So it's proactive as well. But I'm just, everybody has their own learning styles. I find it quite difficult to read. I like to interact. So it's just ongoing interactions and just is learning. And when I do get to read a book, sometimes it's like, oh God, that's so right. Oh, that's so right. And I just, can hardly put it down. There are a few books like that as well.
Are there any particular books you'd recommend to the people listening that have shaped you or really struck you?
Well, The Art of Dialogue, which is from 1999, I think. William Isaacs is just essential. I quite like the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. by Lencioni, particularly because it's deceiving that people can think that we are that sort of thing when we're really quite not. And I like the style of writing. I think we're going to be writing a book and putting one out at the end of the year. It will be a story, a little bit the same. But it's YouTube I watch a lot, actually. Dave Snowden's got something on complexity with Nora Bateson, and that channel, The Big Things, it talks about loads of topics, but it gives people an opportunity to answer questions in as much detail as you want, and you realize how much people can know and how much insight people have got when they really just get a chance to unpack in a non-rushed way responses to really difficult questions. It gives you a lot of hope.
And one of the original missions of this podcast is to inspire the next generation of organisation development and design practitioners, whether you're internal and external. It looks like alignment isn't going away. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out on their career now?
Well, I suppose because there are different ways of doing it, it would be to always look out for alignment as a hook and as a lever in your work, whether that's through how people are behaving or what other frameworks there could be out there to help with it, or what misalignment even looks like and how to interact with organizations about that problem. So I would just advise on sort of constant curiosity and looking out for stuff, and happy to share any of the work that we've done that can help people as well.
Well, I want to say a huge thank you, Lindsay. This is absolutely fascinating. It feels like you're doing important work. This is the kind of stuff that can shift the GDP of nations, I think.
Oh, well, I think, thanks for being interested, and it's like it's everybody who's picking up on it and who's opening up to it, and who's part of it. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. And Danny, what are you taking away from today's conversation?
Oh, lots. I think it's been really interesting. So I was really struck with the thing we talked about at the beginning around the difference between alignment and agreement, and people really understanding the difference between those things. I liked what you talked about, the link between alignment and adaptability and resilience, and how important that is for organizations, and the importance of language. And language really matters, and the words we use, and the importance of dialogue. Yeah,
and I really agree on all this one. And the thing that I'm going to take away from this is, I think it's so obvious, like some of the theories, but when you see it, it's just so deep. Is alignment is a moving target. This isn't this holy grail. We're aligned. That's it. Yeah. We're done. Like, everything shifts and constantly, so we have to tend to it all of the time. So it's been absolutely brilliant. If people want to follow your work as preparation for this week, your website's got loads of resources on it, lots of papers on there. You're very active on LinkedIn as well. What's the best way for people to follow your work? And if they're interested in learning more about Mirror and the brilliant tool, what's the best way for people to contact you?
So our website, mirroralignment.com, is the best way. But we do put a lot of effort into our Substack posts in a channel called The Alignment Lens. So a lot of our latest thinking and our latest research we put through into articles there. But happy to hear from anybody who wants to find out more.
Brilliant. And that Substack is really good. I read it in depth. There's loads of really good stuff, really thought-provoking as well. So if you want to be provoked, go to the Substack, and there's loads of papers on the Mirror website as well. So thank you so much. It's been brilliant. All of the links that you've shared today are going to be in our show notes. So if you are really interested, just go to the show notes below. And if you know someone who is in a misaligned organization and is showing all the signs of being an overwhelmed manager who just can't quite get people together to focus on the same thing, then please do reach out. And also feel free to share this video with others as well who you think will find it useful as well. We get so many shares each week from people who've watched it and gone, that's just really useful. So please share it with colleagues and they'll find it really useful as well. But most important, thank you so much, Lindsay, for making time for this. We really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us all the way from Holland today.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Garen. It's been lovely to speak to you.